Hello, welcome to Scotland at 7. It's Friday the 11th of February. I'm Hugh Stewart and I'm in a Glasgow studio, and tonight we're going to be joined by Michelle Thomson, MSP for Falkirk, and that's where you are just now, I think. Michelle, is that right?
Falkirk East.
You're
Make
in
sure you
East.
get the Falkirk East. Falkirk
Lesser.
West is Michael Matheson. I'm Falkirk East.
Right, the eastern part of Falkirk, right. Is that the bit at the other side of Camelin? That's not the Camelin area, is it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it doesn't have all that much of Falkirk in it. It's got Bowness, very important.
Oh,
A
aye.
lot of the villages, Grangemouth, obviously, Stenhouse Muir, skirts round kind of
Oh,
Falkirk and
yes,
so
so
on.
you're that area over that way. Well, tonight, Michelle, our discussion is about pensions. So what I'm going to do now is just give a quick 5 minutes introduction to where we are with pensions in the UK and moving towards independent Scotland. So let's have a look at that and we'll discuss it in a couple of minutes, Michelle. So pensions in Scotland, where are we now? Now, starting point, these are the facts about the UK pensions at the moment. First of all, every retired person who has contributed for 10 years national insurance will be entitled to a state pension. Although you have to get a full pension, you have to be in the system for 35 years. So basically, if you work and pay national insurance between 10 years and 35 years, you get the full state pension. Secondly, the UK pension is paid out of current income from national insurance contributions. It does not come from an accrued fund. The third thing we need to know about is that you're entitled to a full UK state pension if you have the full record of national insurance contributions, and I believe at the moment that's 35 years. There has been talk that that may go up as people are living longer, but at the moment 35 years of contributions entitles you to the full state pension. And the next point, currently anyone with less than full state pension entitlement, anyone with less than 35 years, can have their pension made up with pension credits paid by the DWP. Also, I believe people who might have been working abroad, I think you can update your missing years that way. So that's where we are with the UK pension now. That's the system that Scotland will inherit moving to independence. Now, looking at slide 3, now how does the UK pension compare around the world? Now, I've not done a full comparison here. Michelle, you probably know more about this than I do, but just to give us a quick comparison, the new state pension in the UK was brought in 2016, and that entitles people to £179.60 per week, and that's £9,339 a year. Now, looking at another couple of countries of similar size, in Ireland, for example, their pension is also a flat rate. It's not means tested, and that's 11,024 per year. That's roughly that. Of course, it's in euros, so doing a rough translation, it's estimated at about 11,024 per year. In Netherlands, they have a system which is linked to the minimum wage, so presumably that increases as wages increase. Now, the Dutch system and several other countries varies according to whether it's a single person or a retired couple. So a retired couple will receive the equivalent of £9,048 each, or if it's a single retired person, that person gets 13,208. Again, that's roughly translated from euros. Now, looking at Denmark, a country of about the same size as Scotland, the folks' pension gives you 14,053 to each person in a retired couple, but again, a single person there would get 19,032. So pensions in the UK are worked out in different ways in each country, but they generally depend on some sort of entitlement based on contributions you've made while at work. So there we are. That's a UK state pension. It's certainly not the best, but it's maybe not the worst either. So let's finally look at the question going forward towards independence is who pays? Now, the Scottish Government's position from the 2014 White Paper is that Scotland would administer the state pension in Scotland to pensioners living in Scotland. So the Scottish Government would take full responsibility for that. Secondly, the state pension in Scotland would be paid from the current Scottish national insurance contributions, which is the same as we have at the moment with the UK system. So the big question, does Scotland have enough money to afford it? Well, yes, the answer is yes. Taken from the latest GERS figures, which are from the year 2020 to 21, Scotland's pension liability, what the bill we would have to pay out to pensioners, comes to 8.5 billion. It's 8,517 millions. And the income in the GERS figures This is national insurance contributions which were actually paid in Scotland in the year ending 21, comes to, as you see, 11.476 billion. That's 11 and 476,000 million. So yes, the income in national insurance in Scotland is greater than the amount of pensions we have to pay in Scotland. So can Scotland afford to pay the current state pension or even more? Well, the answer, Michelle, looks like a quite straightforward yes. The money is there to pay for it. Okay, so I hope you agree with that. First of all, can I ask you a general question? Have I got that right? Is that your general understanding of the pensions position in the UK and in Scotland as it moves forward to independence?
I mean, to be honest, I'm not even entirely sure why you need me on this programme. The only thing I would add to it is if I get out in front of me just for people to quote my trusty white paper, hopefully you can see that there, because I did catch the First Minister the other night referencing to Glenn Campbell of the BBC that he should really go back and revisit what was said there. And so I quote, "For those people living in Scotland in receipt of the UK state pension at the time of independence, the responsibility for the payment of that pension will transfer to the Scottish Government." It also makes clear that all the different types of state pensions, basic state pension, graduated retirement benefit, and so on, would be paid on time and in full. And fundamentally, all state pension accrued up to the point of independence anywhere within the UK will count as your state pension entitlement. So I think it backs up those points that you've put in your slides and is absolutely emphatically clear. And there's been quite a bit of mischief making about this over the past few weeks, as you know, trying to suggest that, first of all, the UK government would say that, right, well, that those pension contributions you've made for however many years, tough. They don't exist. And that's utterly ludicrous. And you kind of think, well, the UK as a state is very keen, for example, to claim and to remind people that it was UK as a state that voted to leave the EU, but without also remembering that it is the UK as a state who has in the order of £2 trillion worth of debt. So I think we can be aware that, you know, Scotland and the SNP has always been very clear that we're happy to pay our proportionate share of any debt. But of course, there is an assets and there is a liabilities consideration. And this is all mixed up in that wider picture. So hopefully for your watchers, it's made the position quite clear. I regard what's been going on as really just dreadful scaremongering. It's not good enough and it's completely outrageous. And maybe what's been happening goes right to the heart of why more and more people are turning to yes, because this lack of respect that the Unionists, the Tories and Labour would yet again club together to deliberately seek to frighten people in this way. I mean, I just don't see it, if I'm honest, as a vote winner for them, because it speaks volumes about how they regard our relationship.
Yes, it's interesting that you've picked up on the fact that, well, I hate to use the phrase weaponised, I can't think of another one just now, but pensions are being weaponised by the No campaign. It's amazing, isn't it, by the way, that we have a No campaign when we don't actually have a referendum, but they seem to have hit the ground running. But I also noticed this myself because we were visited by Labour Party just last week at our house leafleting for the May elections, and quickly the conversation turned to independence and referendums and pension. And we were told at our door by the Labour Party candidate that, yes, you leave the UK, you lose your pension. So it seems that from that example, it definitely is being used, isn't it? It definitely looks like they think they've got a winner. So I'm going to ask you, do you think, once this is explained, you've just clarified the position, is this the big winner? The No campaign seems to think that this is their ace in the pack. Do you think it's going to work for them?
Well, the problem they've got is this is Project Fear on stilts. We've seen it all before, and this kind of negative campaigning only has a limited shelf life. Point number one, people kind of remember the promises that they made if people voted no in 2014, like the only safe way to stay in the EU is if you vote no and so on. And so I think for them, it's a law of diminishing returns. Because the idea that either, on the one hand, they're suggesting that Scotland is such an utter economic basket case, we can't afford to pay the pensions, or two, that people in good faith, through respect and trust in their state, have made these contributions, and for the temerity of wanting to run our own affairs to say, well, tough, we're taking everything and you'll get nothing. This is why I don't think it's a great vote winner that they imagine it is. And of course, it goes to the heart that they're utterly devoid now of ideas. So if you imagine that a referendum should be based on two propositions. One, the bold, audacious vision of Scotland, what it can be as an independent state, and the current UK. And of course, people are looking at the current UK and saying, well, obviously, there's been a lot about energy price rises and the fundamental mismanagement of our natural resources in terms of not building an oil fund for so on, the cost of living crisis, inflation is rollicking. And then they're going to say, but to top it all, this is what we think of you. We're going to take the money you've already contributed and not allow that to be added up as a liability, that money that it owes the Scottish Government to pay for what's already been contributed. And that is just, I just don't think it's going to work.
Yes, it's scraping the barrel, and yes, and the arguments can certainly be taken apart as we just have done. And now you're interested in change, aren't you? You've just reminded me of what they always say: if you want to change an organisation, I wonder if that works to changing a company. They always say, don't they, that, as you just put it, you need to give the audience a vision of why things will be better, and then you have to have clear steps to get there. That's the starting point, right? So what we're trying to do. Let's look at pensions. Can pensions be better then? Is that a thing that the Yes campaign can actually take as a positive? As they never mind £179,
I think so.
how about £200 a week?
I mean, it's interesting. You set out the figures, the relative figures, and we always need to treat them with caution because different types of benefits are loaded in different ways in different countries. But I think most people would generally concede that UK-based pensions are not cooking on gas. They're not the best that they could be. And of course, the failure to reinstate the triple lock by the UK government, and then now, as I've said, rollicking inflation, means that in real terms, pensioners are going to be even worse off. So the question needs to be asked, would it be a point of principle that pensioners who worked hard all their lives to contribute to Scotland, and indeed people who choose to move here and settle here and retire and enjoy their life, could pensions be better? In other words, would it be a possible policy for the SNP that not only are they guaranteed what they would have got anyway, but indeed get more? Now, this is not a policy that has been worked out yet, as I understand it. And I guess we'll need to wait for a proposition for a new independence referendum. But if it were up to me, I think we would want to increase those pensions because things are going to get very, very difficult when you look at how pensioners need to live their lives. And of course, let's not forget that important group of WASPy women as well, who, due to the actions of the UK government changing without adequate notice the retirement age for women, who have really lost out badly and continue to campaign to this day. And they've worked very, very hard to get as far as they have and been supported very actively by the SNP. So that would need to be rectified as well.
Now let's look at the question of people who move cross-border, either people who move from Scotland to England or vice versa. Now, there's obviously going to be kind of a lot of anomalies when, well, for example, we know at the moment English people can retire to Spain, Scottish people can retire to Spain on a UK pension, and there isn't a problem there. So one of the anomalies, of course, will be if somebody from England retires and then moves to Scotland. So I guess we'd be saying, from what you said earlier on, they would also be fully entitled to a Scottish pension. Would there be any issue of asking our UK government to make a contribution? Supposing thousands of UK citizens decided to retire to Scotland, that, well, they might well do that. I can easily see a scenario where a lot of people might want to do that, can you?
Well, yeah, and of course, this concept of valuing assets and liabilities is easy to say, but it's very, very complicated to do to actually do all the maths, if you like. But you need to come up with some framework principles as to what happens in those situations. And spoiler alert, this isn't unusual. This is exactly the sort of arrangements that are already in place. So, for example, if a UK citizen chooses to move to Spain, as we know, they continue to get their pension paid there. So it's not unique and it's not different. And then there would be rules applied as to what they would get. And you're correct to point out that the reciprocal nature of people from England choosing to move to Scotland, or indeed from Scotland, because people often to retire to be near their family, choosing to move to England. And that needs to be agreed. And what we're talking about here is two governments behaving in an entirely responsible way to get the fairest and best outcome for their citizens, because pensions are not just a vehicle, whether they're paid out of national insurance or whether there's a pot, they're actually a bond of trust between the state and between the citizen. And that's why I'm so appalled at what they're doing. The idea that they think it's okay just to say, well, no, tough, off you go. That's ridiculous. And there is precedent for working these things out and putting the arrangements in place. And again, I refer any watchers to the white paper. And I'll even give you the pages for those of you who still kept your copy like I have. Around about page 431, there's a whole stack of questions and answers. What would happen? So, for example, things like pensions agencies that would pay it. Well, of course, we've already got pensions agencies. I think one's based in Motherwell, and I forget off the top of my head where they're based, and they're part of the Department of Work and Pensions at the moment. Well, they would continue. They already have experience of working out and paying pensions. So I think the main message I'm saying is that we need to be responsible about this. We need to reassure people that first and foremost their pensions will be paid in full. I think it's not unreasonable to suggest that, of course, they could actually get a higher pension given the considerable wealth that Scotland has. And any nonsense about people not getting their entitlement is exactly that.
Yeah, incidentally, I also remember in the white paper that it was cited, for example, how would we collect other taxes in Scotland, and it mentions the Hugh Kilbride tax office. So they're already doing that job, so they'll just continue doing the job under new management, if you like. So there isn't any massive problem with people moving from one country to another. In fact, for this programme, I looked up the EU system. In 27 EU countries, people could move between 4 or 5 different countries throughout their working life, but they still get their pension entitlement. I think they get the pension in the country they last worked in, wherever they are. So if they can
There's
manage it within
arrangements are made.
27, yeah.
It's
So
basically arrangements are made. This is not an unusual situation. It simply needs to be worked out and the framework agreement put in place. And that's part of, because we would also, I anticipate, have a transition period to allow all these things to be worked out. And, at the end of the day, you have to do this sensibly and you have to do it rigorously because, as I've always said, let the unionist politicians do what they want because they're seriously burning bridges here. And I think they're very, very ill advised. At the end of the day, England continues to be our closest neighbour. We'll continue to trade with them. We've got every imagine must have relatives there. I myself am half English. My mother was from Reading. So, when it comes to it, there will be a sensible discussion. And any thought of doing otherwise is really, they're demeaning themselves. I would go as far as and say that it's a ridiculous notion.
yeah, in fact, I also have relatives in England. In fact, we worked in England for about 30 years or something. I was near Derby. And so, yeah, I'm centrally involved in this myself. I wonder if this is one of those situations where the kind of rhetoric and the kind of threats or the fear, the project fear before a referendum will be very different to the reality after it. In other words, people from the UK states might make sort of statements threatening, but do you think after a successful yes referendum, well, they'll just get on with the job and sit down with us and negotiate, and all of the fighting of the referendum will be forgotten?
Well, they have to do that. I mean, well, you make an important point. I think the unionists need to be quite careful how far they're prepared to go with this, because what they're basically saying is that if you forget the quite correct comments you've made about there not actually being a pensions pot and so on, but what we're talking about is assets and liabilities in a relationship which we've called the United Kingdom being built up over time. And if you use the analogy with a couple getting divorced, and one of the couple is saying, well, that's it, because you're leaving me, I'm taking everything. This now belongs to me. And that is an utterly ridiculous proposition. But they're still going to have to share custody of the children and have kids' birthdays and all the rest of it. What sensible person would, say, well, I'm taking everything, you get nothing, even though we all know that actually divorce, for people who have been through that, is also subject to a legal process where the assets are valued, the liabilities are totaled up, and an agreement that meets each party is put in place. And that's exactly what will happen. So, do I think afterwards, well, yeah, of course. And it's the very first point I made. The UK as a state at the moment has in the order of £2 trillion of debt. Now, I completely agree with the SNP position that says we are a responsible government and we are a responsible state and we will pay our fair share. But for them then to say, oh, well, we won't pay your pensions, I think it's a wee bit unwise, if I'm honest, and they know that as well. And so it really is just the worst of politics. And I do think they're demeaning themselves because there will be many people who are not wise enough to watch your program and who will have been frightened about this. And it is them starting Project Fear on stilts early. And I myself have noticed how much there's been just in the past couple of weeks. It's almost like a venom and an anger that how dare we not get back in our box and tug our forelock? Well, sorry, guys, we're not doing that. We are absolutely going for it. So I expect there's going to be more discussions and debates of this sort of thing. So the more you can do to make sure people get the accurate information, the better.
Well, we're certainly going to do our best, and as we expect
Yeah.
the referendum campaign rolls out, well, perhaps we'll be hearing in the next few weeks when the referendum debate is going to take place in the Scottish Parliament. I don't suppose you know when that is, do you, Michelle?
No, I don't. All I know is that it's been a very, very long week that the Scottish budget was passed successfully. All
Aye.
credit to Kate Forbes in that respect. And next week is recess, which for most MSPs means that they get to spend more time out and about in their constituency. Although I must admit, I was visiting a very good business this afternoon. So, but I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Yeah, tell us. I'd like to be able to say you heard it first on Broadcasting Scotland. Aye, let us know. So you just raised a very interesting point about, if you like, it's about the credibility of can the Scottish Government actually put together a mechanism to run pensions. For example, about credibilities, we could offer £300 a week pensions, but there might be a point at which folk will say, but can you manage it? We've been reporting this week on the Scottish Government gradually taking over the adult disability payment. So gradually more and more of the welfare state is in fact being handled by Scotland. That comes in fully in August, doesn't it? So a new mechanism that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago, it's being gradually put into place, and Scotland really will be largely replacing the DWP over the next few months. So do you think the Scottish Government is establishing more credibility as a body which knows how to administer things like benefits, and therefore, if it can do that,
Yeah.
why can't they do pensions too?
I tell you, one of the interesting things about the new welfare benefits, and people will be aware of the horror stories associated with personal independence payment, and in particular, the really very demeaning application process that people are required to go through as it being run by the UK government. And the Scottish Government, the way the work's been done, is used a lot of focus groups so that people could sit down and understand, well, how would the individual, our citizens, like to take receipt of benefits when they're already, the fact that they need them in very difficult circumstances. And of course, it came back strong and clear that they wanted to be treated with dignity and with respect. And that has been built into the heart of the processes of these new benefits. And I think that is the most telling thing. It's more complex than just building the systems to administer them. It's actually how people be treated, the almost the human systems, if you like. And that, I think, for people who are going to be at the receiving end of the Scottish government running this, are going to be really pleasantly surprised, because they will be treated in a different way. And it's well known the DWP really seem to go out of their way to make people feel bad about entitlements that they are due for circumstances that are already very difficult and beyond their control. So I think that will be the main difference, because what we're trying to do here is, this isn't, as ever been for me, about just Scotland being independent. It's about creating the kind of state we want to see, that values people, that treats people with respect, that wants to encourage entrepreneurs, that wants to make sure that people can live a full life where they're not unemployed, that they have good jobs and so on. And so I think it's part about, this is what we can do when we have the chance to do it. And that, to me, is a big differentiator there. And people will see that when it's rolled out. I'm confident of that.
Yes, so that's being rolled out as we've reported last night. The city of Dundee and Perth and Kinross have been beginning with the pilot schemes for the new benefits, and that will be over the whole country by the end of August. Now let's go back to there's been a debate this week in some of the newspapers. Some of the unionist papers have been trying to fog the arguments about pensions, and Ian Blackford believes, for example, he was misquoted when he was asked about who's responsible for pensions in Scotland. So have you been following the discussion between Ian Blackford and Ros Altman?
Yes, and as Ian correctly points out, that Ros is highly thought of and knowledgeable. And I do feel there was quite a bit of mischief making. I mean, Ian Blackford, for people that don't know about his background, he is extremely experienced around banking and finance. He ran Deutsche Bank in Scotland for long years. He's really well thought of in that area. And the idea to try and pigeonhole Ian as somebody who didn't have a clue was really ill advised, because he's a highly experienced and well thought of individual in his career before he went into politics. And likewise with Ros Altman, who Ian has worked with before. And I mean, I haven't got the quote in front of me, perhaps you have, but she had made a quote which Ian quote tweeted to make clear that she thought it was nonsense as well, which was very interesting. And I suspect it could be the case that some people in Westminster are also looking to the end game and think, well, wait a minute, we've got to have a good relationship with Scotland if they become independent. So I can't remember exactly what she said, but I can dig out the tweet if you would need me to.
Yes, well, yes. Yeah, I was looking at that earlier
Actually, I
on.
have found it. There you
Go
go.
ahead. Go ahead, please.
Right, so Ros Altman had tweeted, bit baffled, I'm quoting here, guys, by comments on hashtag state pensions and hashtag Scott. State pensions are built up by your national insurance payments and paid to you whether or not you live in this country. Two caveats, which you already put in your slides. If you have less than 10 years NI contributions, you may get no pension. Two, annual increases would need negotiation. And actually, that's one thing that we haven't covered off. What the UK government does with people who have moved abroad, say people have chosen to retire to Spain, they don't uprate their pensions in the same paltry way as they do for pensioners here. That's just something else to realise, to note, apart from them not reinstating the triple lock. And so there's quite a bit of sort of traffic in there. And Ian himself has quote tweeted it saying, Ros is rightly highly respected for her knowledge on pension matters. I had the pleasure to shadow Ros when she was pensions minister, and we always had reasoned discussions. She speaks, unlike some others, I would gently suggest, a pet salesman with authority on pensions matters.
Okay, yes. So, yeah, beware pet salesman selling no campaign literature.
Yes, be well.
So,
Here's a hot tip: don't take pensions advice from a pet salesman. There
Pet,
you go.
pet food, let's be accurate. Pet food, I think it is,
Pet
Michelle.
food. Pet food,
Um,
yeah.
okay, so just go back to the famous triple lock. Let's just go over what that was. Pensions, of course, have to be linked to something because we live in a world of inflation. I think I mentioned earlier on, it's the Netherlands system, I think, or one of the one, or was it the Danish one, is linked to the minimum wage. Which one was that again? One of the slides we looked at earlier. So what I'm saying is
I think it
if
was
pensions,
Denmark, was it not Denmark?
probably Denmark, the folks' pensions. So for your
That
pensions
was
to still be
that
worth
was
something
Denmark.
in 10 years. Oh, here we are. So let's have a look at that one again. It was the third slide, I think. Oh yes, well, the folks' pension is just very good. Yes, let's have 14,000 or 90,000 a year. But I think it's the Netherlands one, which is also linked to the minimum wage. So it's got to be either linked to rising wages or to rising prices. And I think that was two parts of the triple lock, which is now gone. I forget what the third one was. Maybe you'll remind me.
Yeah, sorry. I was actually I was looking up what the white paper was saying about the triple lock. My recollection, but I can't quite find the page, was that the Scottish government would plan to restore the triple lock with that difference. There's a percent inflation and there's a percentage which I think they set at 2.5%. Was that the third item you were looking at? I was just looking for it here.
But no, the triple lock was, I think it was Gordon Brown, wasn't it? He put the triple lock and the current Chancellor has dropped it. I think that's what happened with the triple lock, if I
And I
remember
think the
rightly.
promise was to restore it. But I suppose the important point is that without something such as this, the real value of pensions really decreases. And this is the issue today for UK-based pensioners, that without that triple lock, without that increase by the lower of the three items that are in the triple lock, the real terms value of their pension is decreased. So there is nothing to stop a Scottish government restoring that. But you know what? Maybe they wouldn't even need to do that. Maybe they could increase the value of pensions to a reasonable amount and then keep pace with inflation.
Yes, it would certainly be not too extravagant to put it up to at least the level of Ireland anyway. I don't know if we can move
Yeah.
to the level of Denmark straight away, but well, that
Yeah.
depends, I suppose, on the economy in the future. But the other issue, of course, is about the working population, because in the UK system and the future Scottish system, it really means that people who are working today are paying for people who were working 20 years ago. In other words, the retired generation is having their pension paid by today's working generation. So, of course, that raises the question of how many people do we have in the workforce. So, of course, we don't have control of inflation any longer. We don't have free movement within the European Union. Do you think this is a big issue that future Scotland should be encouraging new Scots to come
I
and work here?
cannot emphasize what an issue this is. Obviously, we've had a forced removal from the EU by a UK vote where Scotland voted to remain in, just absolutely clearly every local authority area. But then we've got the madness around the restrictions in immigration. And in one of the committees I'm on, which is Economy and Fair Work, the work that we're looking at the moment, it has come through sector after sector, industry after industry, that the lack of access to labour is a critical issue. And of course, what can the Scottish Government do about it? Because we don't have control over immigration. So let's imagine what happens when Scotland becomes independent. So, what is Scotland? Scotland is a vibrant, welcoming. This is a good thing, with jobs, who wants to get on the world, who wants to keep pace. Excellent universities, so good. Treats its people well, in terms of the example I mentioned earlier. So you can imagine, as we saw before the drawbridge was pulled up when we were pulled out of the EU, that people will want to move to Scotland. And the sort of people that move are young, aspirational people who want to create a life for themselves, who want to get a job, who want to contribute, and so on. And guess what? When they do that, they pay tax, and that goes into the larger coffers. So I can anticipate an influx of people wanting to come to Scotland, particularly as we found out today, the recent report saying that now the estimated time for us to rejoin the EU is 3 to 4 years. That's really not very long at all when you build in a transition period. The transition period starts from day in the lead up to independence and perhaps goes afterwards as well, as we saw with Brexit. So I would anticipate a lot of people will want to move here, and we want young people with their ideas, their different culture, to come to our shores and to contribute. We don't want to turn inwards and look backwards, which is a very distressing facet of what seems to be happening in England with Brexit. Not for us at all, for sure.
Yes, even in England and throughout the UK, immigration was positive, although facts don't really matter when it comes to Brexit. But it was actually argued that people who come to the UK are usually young, usually working age. And when you think about it, the sort of people who have the energy and the initiative to travel hundreds or thousands of miles, they're probably not decrepit old idiots like me. They probably are young and lively
I'm
people,
glad you
just the
said
kind
you,
we
not
need.
me.
Aye, so this may be anecdotal, yeah, but I know plenty of people in Glasgow who have come to work in Scotland from other
Yeah.
places, and they love it. Yeah, so yeah, that's true. We are friendly. I can quote loads of people to say that. I'm sure
No,
we are.
we are.
So
We are.
we've got everything to gain then from taking the powers of an independent state, because that gives us more opportunities. So let's just summarise what we've said about pensions. So it's been raised this week, really, by people in the Prospective No campaign, that if you leave the UK, you lose your pension. So we've established that that's really rubbish. That's really just scaremongering. And we've also established that the Scottish Government's position is that on independence, pensions in Scotland will be administered by the Scottish Government. And the other important point to make is that even the GERS figures themselves, which the Tories and Labour are very fond of quoting, the GERS figures themselves show we can easily afford to pay the Scottish pensions at the moment, and in fact there's no reason why we couldn't increase it. So, and just finally, we both agreed earlier on, I think, that if the No campaign thinks that this is their big argument, then you think it's not really. It shows the weakness of the No campaign and not a strength at all. Is that a reasonable summary of where we've got to so far this evening,
I think
Michelle?
it's a great summary. And of course, it shows the paucity of ambition for Scotland. And that is what they think of us, that they are going to terrify people who are either retired or approaching retirement with these scare stories. That speaks volumes to me about the lack of respect for Scotland. And it is that lack of respect that will be the turning point for many people who might be wondering how they're going to vote. So I've got no time for it. It's scaremongering and inaccurate. And the last wee point I should make, which has come through strongly from the programme, but I did see some people on Facebook commenting about occupational pensions. And I hope all of yours have picked up so far that this is a debate entirely about state pensions, not your occupational pensions that you might be fortunate enough to get from your employer, because that is another area where people were quite happy for confusion to creep in. So, for example, I worked at what was known as Standard Life for many years. The idea that Standard Life would turn around and say, no, we're not paying your pension now. Ridiculous. But again, I saw some people on Twitter and so on who were quite happy to mislead people in that way. And that's really scandalous. So I think you've nailed it. You're absolutely right. Let's crack on. We've got a job to do. And as I always say to everybody, get out there. Make sure you're convincing people, you're informed, you're knowledgeable, because we've got a job to be getting done.
Yeah, great, Michelle. And that's what we're here for on Broadcasting Scotland. We want to make sure that people are armed and equipped with the information. And we'll look at the stories and we'll do our best to explain what lies behind them with the help of excellent guests like yourself. So, Michelle Thomson, MSP, thank you for joining us on tonight's programme. And I hope we can get the chance to speak to you again. So, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so I'm sure we'll come back to this topic again as the referendum campaign unfolds. But for now, that's it for Broadcasting Scotland on pensions. So I'm Hugh Stewart. Thanks for watching Scotland at 7 tonight. Now, can I just remind you all that We are free to air. It's our promise to you that we'll continue to be free to air. We're not going to go subscription, but we do depend nonetheless on your subscription funds. So if you look at the website on the screen there, broadcastingscotland.scot, it would be great if you could click on that link that you'll find in the website and become one of our subscribers, starting at £5 a month. It's our subscribers which keep us going. We receive no other funding. So as we move into this maybe pre-referendum period, I'm sure if you're watching us tonight, you agree that we do need independent broadcasting in Scotland, but we're only able to come on the air with your contributions. So please keep them coming and please pass it on to a friend. And the more funds we have in here, the more programmes we'll be able to make to inform Scotland from Scotland and not from London or elsewhere. So thanks for watching this evening. I'm Hugh Stewart, and we've got Leslie Ord on the Full Scottish on Sunday. And I'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.